If you have a large vocabulary and a good grasp of the rules of English grammar, why would you ever need to resort to slangy terms to make yourself understood? Maybe because speech is more than just the literal content carried by the words. It often conveys how the speaker feels and how the speaker expects to be perceived, which is one reason the word like is everywhere in modern speech, even as many sticklers profess to despise it. From KERA in Dallas, this is Think. I'm Krys Boyd. I'm not talking about like in the classic sense of I like dogs or she looks just like her sister, or even about the ubiquity of the like as a marker of approval in social media. Rather, the ways many of us use this little word in creative ways like 1,000 times a day. And although we've been told it can make us sound indecisive and not so bright, my guest believes it is not just defensible, but often indispensable when we're trying to get a point across. Megan C. Reynolds is editor at Dwell magazine and author of the new book, Like, A History of the World's Most Hated and Misunderstood Word. Megan, welcome to Think.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You would not need to defend the way you and many of us use like if you hadn't felt attacked for it in the first place. So who gets spun up about this word?
In my research and anecdotally over the course of writing this book, it has been honestly primarily older men are the ones who I have heard, say it's not, this word is not that this word is useless, but, cut this word from your speech. You'll sound smarter if you do so. It's not proper to say like all of the time in the ways that we do that are bad. It's largely men, which was not surprising to me in any capacity.
What seems to bother purists is the use of like as an informal interjection. And I looked this up. Dictionary.com explains this is used in speech, often non-volitionally or habitually, to preface a sentence, to fill a pause, to express uncertainty, or to intensify or neutralize a following adjective. Mm-hmm. Can you debunk all that for us? Explain for us what that means. Give us some examples.
Okay, sure.
In like English, yeah.
In like English, perfect. Something I'm skilled at. Okay, so like is one of our more common filler words. So you say it when, I think a lot of people say it unconsciously, but it's a filler word when you're trying to string together two different thoughts in a sentence and you haven't necessarily thought about the thing you're going to say after it, but it's buying you a little bit of time. It's also an intensifier, which is one of my favorite ways to use it. So that's like if I said I have 1 million things to do today. I don't. I actually do have a lot of stuff to do today, to be frank, but it's not it's not 1 million things. That sort of draws attention to the fact that I am busy. And also that, and maybe a little bit about how I feel about being busy. Because if I said I had 5 things to do today, that's, I think, slightly different than 1 million. One would assume if I'm saying I have 1 million things to do today, that maybe I feel a little stressed or otherwise something around those things. And so that though I think that covers most of what the dictionary definition that you read to me says. But yeah, those are the ways that I think people get the most upset about. But I do think those are some of the ways where it's the most useful.
There was an early moral panic over the word like in the 1950s when this cigarette ad came out. But that was because it allegedly appeared where as belonged?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it's the Winston cigarette ads, I believe. A Winston cigarette I'm not going to remember it. Basically, yes.
A Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Thank you. And grammatically correct is a Winston cigarette tastes good as a cigarette should. And
it makes me laugh that people objected to the grammar in the ad and had no problem with the marketing of tobacco to everybody who could come across that ad.
Yes. I mean, that is, I agree. I don't think there is any problem. Obviously, I don't think there's any problem with the like in there. I think that grammatical purists, of which there are still many out in this world, would probably still have some issue with that. One of the things that I think about like in there is that it sounds a little more colloquial, it sounds a little more familiar and a little less prim and proper. And obviously, I assume that the cigarette marketers knew that and were doing that because of that.
You mentioned grammatical purists. I mean, we've all been raised on the idea that there are rules to grammar, but there are
Mhm.
two different ways to look at those rules. The prescriptivists have one way, and the descriptivists have another. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, so so the difference between prescriptivists and descriptivists I think feels pretty self-explanatory, but prescriptivist is like this word needs to be used in this way. It needs to be used in this way because it says so in the dictionary or wherever else. The end. That's it. A descriptivist, on the other hand, that approach is more sort of not more expansive, but more understanding, more sort of interested in actually how language is being used now as we're speaking it, as it's developing. And one of the other things, dictionaries are generally, I think, are now generally descriptivist texts. They're sort of letting us know how a word is used as updated as it can be. But by the time when a dictionary is printed, even any new editions or whatever, it's already out of date because there are languages moving at such a rapid clip that you can only sort of capture it and sort of archive it as opposed to like keeping an actual straight accurate documentation of like how it's changing as we live.
So, to the extent that we have rules in every language, that's because those rules function to help us all understand what's being said, not because people who break them are doing something bad necessarily.
Right. The rules, I mean, my understanding is that the rules exist because you do kind of need to have some rules if we are all speaking the same language. If we're all speaking English, there are obviously nuances to English and across many different ways. But if we're all going to be working with roughly the same tools, then there do need to be some rules so that everybody is on as close, not necessarily even the same page, but like if we're all in the same book, that's probably helpful. Um, but not all of those rules are, I mean, first of all, we're the only ones who are like enforcing the rules.
Right.
So we're in charge of the rules, so we can change the rules if we need to. And that I think is something that people don't ever, I don't know if people really think about that, but like you are in charge, you're your own boss, you're in charge of your own destiny. Change the rule. If the rule isn't working for you, then change it. Or if like society is changing the rule anyway, you can't do much about that either.
Yeah, we do this all the time. Language continues to evolve. You note research that finds the common but maybe non-standard ways that we use like are used by people of all genders, of all ages.
Mhm.
Why do most people who don't care for this tend to place all the blame on young women and teenage girls?
Well, great question. I think because of the Valley Girls, that would be my most educated guess based on the book I wrote. I would say the Valley Girls, in the 80s, they started and many other slang, lots of other slang that I think has probably fallen a bit out of favor was really, really prominent in popular culture. And because Hollywood is Hollywood, movies, the Valley Girls, the Valley is the San Fernando Valley. So the movies at that time sort of spread the way that people were talking naturally. And that I think is how it sort of picked up across the country and became sort of like an epidemic. Even though I don't think it's an epidemic in a bad way, just simply something that happened. And yeah, sorry.
Please continue.
And the girls thing is literally just the Valley Girls were women and young women, and teenage girls, generally speaking, are not necessarily always taken as seriously as their male counterparts. And I will say that every time I say that to a man when I'm speaking about this book, I get a little bit of pushback. And I'm like, well, you were never a teenage girl, I assume. So
It is interesting that the standard is expected to be the way that men are believed to speak.
yes.
It could theoretically work the other way, right? Where we criticize men and boys for not speaking more like women are thought
Mm-hmm.
to speak.
Yes. And I think, it's because, I mean, to your second point, most people learn how to speak through their primary caregivers. And a lot of people's primary caregivers are their mothers. And so you would think that based on that, you would just, yes, it would be like, oh, if you're speaking like a man, whatever that means, then that's bad and let's correct it. But I think the difference between men's speech and women's speech is that men's speech is quite often coded as aggressive, or not aggressive, strong, convincing, powerful, etc. Women's speech is often associated with sort of a weakness, a softness, a sort of a more feelings forward approach, as opposed to, I suppose, like a more action forward approach. But uh, I think that's not a useful way to separate these things anymore, because I think everybody talks the way they talk for in a variety of reasons.
The perception thing really is interesting. You mentioned Valley Girls. There was that Frank Zappa song in the
Mhm.
early 80s. In the movie Clueless, Alicia Silverstone, who played Cher Horowitz, says like a whole lot.
She does.
And it's almost as if those characters, the character in the song and then the character in the movie, they made us associate these things with women, whereas before that, that might not have been the case.
I mean, that could be true. Yeah, I do think that Clueless probably, I would say it didn't help I don't know if it didn't help Like's cause necessarily, because I think the thing about Clueless is that, yes, Alicia Silverstone in the movie is, for all intents and purposes, truly just like a ditz for the first half to three quarters of the film, until she has her, sort of revelation, et cetera, so on. And then but I think that I don't think that character specifically is doing it is saying like and sort of acting like a ditz strategically. I think she just genuinely was very earnest. But what was nice about that is that it proved her sort of turn proves that, you can sound away and look away, but you can also be intelligent. The two are not mutually exclusive in any way. And I think that understanding seems very difficult for people to wrap their brains around. And I do not know why.
Something fascinating I learned from your book is that like as an interjection did not originate with the Valley Girls or with hippies or with
Right.
hepcats or beat poets. How far back does it go in the history of the English language?
In the history of the English language, there are records of it stretching back to the 1600s in court records from the UK. And that's obviously a very good primary source, because it is literally a scribe recording what someone else is saying naturally. And so that was one of the most surprising things to me, because I did sort of assume Valley Girls and then maybe like the Beats, and then maybe there would probably be one other thing kind of before that. So when I learned that, I was pleasantly surprised, and also validated in my defense of the word itself.
You mentioned earlier that language evolves based on, children speaking like their primary caregivers, which is often their mothers, which
Mhm.
are women. But why would young urban women be most likely to evolve the language themselves to then pass on to whatever children they might have?
Well, young urban women, I would say currently, are doing things online a lot. And
Mhm.
so social media, God bless it, is really um, a really powerful vehicle for so many things, so many trends, ways of speaking, and whatever else. And I think that, I talk a lot about TikTok in the book, which is partially because I think it's an unfortunate thing that we do have to pay attention to if we're going to be thinking about culture and how it spreads. And also because over the course of writing this book, I procrastinated a lot by looking at TikTok as a way to sort of reset my brain, which I don't know if that worked. But yeah, that is young women, influencers, whoever else, are hopping on their phones and filming a get ready with me, or talking about their Sephora hauls. And they're speaking in such a manner that comes off as sort of cool to someone else who also would like to receive, large PR packages that they can open in front of their camera or whatever else. I think it becomes aspirational through that medium, through that channel.
Megan, assuming most native speakers have a decent grasp on the essential rules of standard English,
Mhm.
why might we change the way we speak depending on the context of the interaction?
Well, I think that is because hopefully we all have a modicum of emotional intelligence and an ability to sort of read the room and the situation. So, you're going to go into, say, the example I've been using for some reason is like a meeting with your boss. You're maybe going to, depending on your relationship with your boss and the nature of your workplace, you're probably going to approach that interaction slightly differently than you would talking to a friend over a drink, or talking to the guy at the bodega while you're trying to buy toilet paper. We all make these sort of minute calculations about how we're going to say something by simply looking at the situation that we're in and understanding what is perhaps the right way, not the right way, because I don't want to say anything is necessarily right or wrong. What is the appropriate way
Mhm.
to speak or to comport yourself in that situation? And so I think, you know, I think someone can enter a space and realize that based on just how the other person is talking to them or what they're talking about, that you can be a little more casual or more buttoned up or professional or whatever word you want to use for not saying like so much. And I think that is, yeah, emotional intelligence is something that is difficult to achieve. But I think we all have a little tiny bit of it, even if we don't think we do. And that is what allows us to sort of modulate our responses and the way we interact with other people.
You share in the book that your mom's first language was Mandarin. She learned
Mhm.
English in school. Sounds like she's fully fluent. How much does she use like in these ways?
That's a great question. I was really not, she really doesn't. And it's not because, I mean, I do think it is partially because she learned English through a combination of both being taught it in school and also watching like Happy Days on television when she was in Taiwan. Um, but I mean, again, my mother is not, I believe this, if she's not going to listen to this, so that's fine. She's not a particularly formal person in any stretch of the imagination. And she's got a fabulous grasp of the English language. She's been in this country for over 40 years. But no, she doesn't really use it because it's just, I think just the way she learned was just, she was not taught filler words because they don't teach filler words in like ESL classes or when they're teaching English. And my mother and also my cousin both sort of confirmed this for me that, they didn't learn how to properly interject filler words because, when you're teaching English to someone who doesn't speak it, the goal is you're teaching like business English. You're teaching like the English so you can go become a CEO or whatever. And that would would mean, you're going to speak in an authoritative, assertive, clear manner without any additional fluff.
But there's a reasonable case to be made for teaching some of the filler words because they can act as a shibboleth, right? Like whether or
Totally.
not someone has an accent in a language,
Mhm.
knowing those little words make them sound more or less comfortable in that language.
Yes, I think that there is great value in people learning like how to use the English language, not just in the formal sense, but like in the sense of talking to another regular person. Because you're right, I think it would make both I don't necessarily care about the other person feeling more comfortable. I care about the person whose second language is whose first language is not English and who is really trying. I want them to feel comfortable. And so I think that, yeah, teaching them sort of these are sort of interjections that we use for X, Y, or Z reasons, I think would be I think that would be a benefit. I think it would maybe make it easier for everyone to sort of feel on the same level, which I think is what we all want in an interaction. Is everyone wants to feel like they're meeting someone at their where they're at as opposed to above or below, or at least that's what I'd like.
You mentioned that your mom grew up watching Happy Days and sort of practicing her English that way. It's fascinating now that so many young people around the world talk about watching Friends, in which the language is quite different than even a show like Happy Days.
I mean, Friends, I think, is a excellent primer for like how regular people speak English. And that is a testament to, I suppose, its writers, but also the actors and also just the premise of the show itself, obviously. And its general popularity means that it's been syndicated a bajillion times across the world in various ways. And so that, that speaks to also my cousin learned English both in school through like I think Disney movies, and then also YouTube. And I
Mm.
think YouTube is an incredible way because my cousin speaks English. It's incredible. I was like, oh, wow, very impressed. But yeah, it's YouTube, I think, is useful because that's not an actor for the most part. It's a real person doing their sort of YouTube thing, which is like, sort of in the influencery vein of speaking in cadence and whatever else, but that's still a regular person talking like a regular person. And that's a great way to learn English, because that at least teaches you like this is how people speak to each other when they're just speaking to each other.
You note in the book that like can perform emotional labor in a sentence, by which I think you mean like what, soften the blow, perhaps, of
Yeah.
things that are difficult to say?
Yeah. I think when I did say that, and I realized I was like, what did I mean by that? But yeah, sort of softening the blow. I think when you're in the middle of a conversation that is difficult for any reason, good, bad, in between, you're not necessarily always fully prepared to have that conversation. And that's not a bad thing, because I think that is so normal. We enter situations that are highly charged in either direction, and you have a vague idea of how you think you want it to go, and you have a vague idea of how you're going to do whatever you're going to do to make it go that way, but you can only control yourself and what you say. You can't control what the other person hears. And so I think, when like is used as a hedge, or when it is like softening the blow of a difficult thing, I think that's a kindness that you're doing to the other person. And it's a kindness that you're doing to yourself, because you're also buying yourself a little bit of time while you're speaking to get to your point, to think of the next thing you're going to say, and also to maybe change how you're going to say it based on the reaction of the other person. And that is, it's like a gentle emotional labor. This is not like heavy lifting necessarily, but it's just like, it's a little thing that we have that we should use and not be afraid to use it.
Reading through the book, I was thinking about the difference in tone and meaning between me telling you, I'm like upset right now, and saying, I'm upset right now.
Yeah.
Even if I don't change the tone of my voice
Right.
necessarily, the second one sounds a great deal more grave than the first.
Yes, because in the second one, I'm like, what is happening? Like,
Right.
what is going on? Do we need to resolve this immediately? And the first one is like, okay, you're upset. Like something is happening. You're probably going to tell me what's going on, but I don't need to like drop everything and close my computer and try to figure out like, have you broken a limb? Like, what is the issue here? And I mean, I think that's useful, because it's like, when one of my parents texts me and says, just call me, I say, hello, what is happening? Are you in the hospital? What's going on? It's that kind of, I'm not saying that they should say like call me, but it's the same kind of thing.
Or it even feels like the difference between someone telling you something via text and that phone ringing, at least in 2025. Because if the phone rings, except maybe for a couple of people in our lives, we know there's something going on.
If the phone rings and it's one of my parents, I'm usually like, hello, what? Immediately. Are you guys, what are you doing? Why are you calling me? Is everything okay? Usually everything is okay. Usually it's like, oh, I haven't talked to you in a while. I'm like, all right, cool. If you could preface if you leave me a voicemail, you could add that in the voicemail. That would be really helpful for me. Like blood pressure in general. Thank you so much. But yeah, I think there is a sense of urgency to a statement that is absent any filler words then, and that is obviously like, it's direct and that's clear, but it's also like, we all need to think about what actually is urgent. And,
So let's talk about like as a modifier of exaggeration. I can say, as you mentioned in the book, I ate like 10 pounds of mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
I can also say I ate 10 pounds of mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. In both of those cases, you're going to understand that I didn't actually eat 10 pounds. Like the most I can manage is 8.
Yes, exactly. 9.5 if I'm being fresh, but yeah.
So why do we need the like in those situations?
Honestly,
what does it do for us?
It's fun. It's like a nice little, you're doing a little bit. You're having fun with the person you're talking to. The person you're talking to also probably understands that if you are someone who says things like that often, which I am, that you tend towards the hyperbolic. And also maybe like if I did say I ate like 10 pounds of mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving, that probably means, again, I obviously didn't do that. I physically am not capable of it. I've never tried, but I don't think I'm capable. And second of all, like I felt very full and kind of gross. Mm-hmm. And that's basically, and I communicated that in one phrase without saying, I felt full and kind of gross, and maybe like had one, like another glass of wine that also contributed to this, and I would like to just go home. I think all of that is wrapped up in that sentence. And if the person who I'm talking to knows me well enough, then they've picked that up and I didn't have to explain myself any further. And I love to not have to explain myself any further unless I really have to.
This is really interesting, this comfort or discomfort with hyperbole in speech. I try to keep it
Yeah,
out of my journalism, but
that's
in
fair.
day-to-day interactions with people in my life, I use hyperbole all the time,
Of
and I expect
course.
people to be able to read this about me. But people who don't know me might need a word like to
Yes.
understand that that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think that is, I mean, obviously, yes, keep it out of the journalism. I also try to do the same, unless yeah, for the most part, I try to do the same. But in real life, I mean, I think it sort of just communicates like personality, a sort of sense
Mhm.
of fun, a sort of like, this is how I feel. This is sort of how I see the world. This is how I feel about the world. And that's not a bad thing. And it's also, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily dramatic. It just means that this is how you see the world and this is how you're conversing. And it's not okay if someone else is a little more staid or whatever else. And that is their problem. But it's simply not yours. You are you, and that's great.
You also bring up a scene from the opening of Beauty and the Beast, the
Oh
movie, where
God.
she's Belle is singing about her little town, and there's
Yes.
this woman that skates in, and she's we would call her maybe a harried
I
housewife,
think that is, yes,
and she
correct.
shrieks, "I need 6 eggs." How is "I need 6 eggs" different from "I need, like, 6 eggs"?
I need 6 eggs is like, I need these eggs yesterday. And yet, like, if you don't have 6 eggs, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but it is urgent that I get
And
these
precisely
eggs.
6, right?
6 eggs. I don't need any more. If I needed 12, I'd probably be screaming that I need 12. I need 6 eggs. Who can say why? It's none of your business, farmer man. Purely my business. Um, that is very clear. That is like, all right, let's get her half a dozen eggs and get her on her way. Totally fine. I need like 6 eggs is kind of like, okay, do you actually need any eggs? Like what? Do you need two? Do you need four? But you think that maybe you need six? Are you sure about the amount of eggs that you like? Do you actually even need eggs in the first place? Like, why are we having this conversation? And I think it's just it lacks the precision and again the urgency that sort of that woman's initial and only cry communicates is that she really needs those eggs now.
And people might think, well, why take away the precision? But there are times when we don't need to be precise. We
Yeah.
sort of need eggs. Maybe we need 4. We could probably buy 7 and make use of them.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean the precision that's still about like the emotional intelligence or at least understanding when it is appropriate to sort of demand something in the way that that woman was demanding. And again, I do believe that she did need those 6 eggs for a very good reason. And I hope that was resolved. But yeah, I don't think it's not, life is not always I need 6 eggs situation. Sometimes it is like, I don't know, I need like 3 bags of chips for this thing that I'm doing. It's like, I don't know. I don't really, probably only need one. I'm going to get the 3 anyway, and that's fine. But no one is asking me for an exact count of the chips or the eggs or the whatever. I am merely saying, I'm estimating because that's normal because I can't predict the future.
To take another swing at the idea that like in a sentence means nothing,
Mm.
you give us the example of what can seem quite similar. So, for example, if we say, like, at the start of a sentence, that is markedly different from saying, like, will you talk about that?
Yeah. So to me, like, is sort of like you're following me, you're following along in this conversation already. You probably agree with what I'm about to say. I'm creating not community necessarily, but like I'm sort of saying, hello, are we seeing eye to eye here? And the answer is probably yes. And so, but like is I think uh preparing to explain yourself further. So maybe you've said something and the other person is like, "Hmm." And you're like, okay, it's like blah, 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 this other thing. And that is very different. Those are two, you really just move the word once, but it is so different. And that I think is amazing that we have, again, one word that can do so many things just based on where it goes or how you say it. But yeah, I think like, is very much, I'm talking, we're talking, you hear me, you understand what I'm saying. Amazing. Great. Let's keep cruising. And like is like, do you actually, hello? Like, are you understanding what I'm saying in a friendly way, not an aggressive way, but I am just going to continue to clarify upon my point until we reach the other, until we reach whatever equilibrium we need to reach in this conversation.
We all type a lot of our casual communications these days, either via
Yes.
text or social media. Are people starting to write more formally using like the ways that we've been describing in the ways that they're used in spoken speech?
I don't think that I see like as much from other people written like in text messages or the other form with Slack like work stuff. I know that I use it a lot in all of those mediums as I am also using it as we are speaking right now. And that's who I am. But I don't have any problem with it. But yeah, I feel like because texting is really that sort of mushy middle between speaking and written communication, that there are no rules, everyone, either people text exactly like how they talk. Sometimes people text in a very different way than the way that they speak normally. And I don't think that I don't think it's bad if like slips in a text message or like in a work Slack, but I do think obviously so much of how we use language is contextual. I think almost everything, you can't answer a question without saying, what is the context? Like where are we at? I mean, I can't answer a question to the best of my ability without knowing the context. And I think that more people could stand to do that, but that's just me.
Megan, we should also talk about the way that people use like to indicate that we have had an experience and have said something to someone else. So, for
Yes.
example, um, your boss might say you need to work all through the weekend, and you might be telling this to your partner and say, I was like, that is a really stupid idea. Chances are your partner understands that you did not say to your boss, that
Correct.
is a really stupid idea. So, what
One
what is like
assumes.
doing for us there?
So that use of like is called the quotative. And it's one of the ones that I think people do actually get pretty upset about because it doesn't logically make sense. You have a word for when you are recounting a story, there is one word that does the work of like in that, and it's said. I said my sister was being annoying. Sorry to all of my sisters who I'm constantly dragging every time I do this. Like I said, my sister was annoying. I was like, my sister is so annoying. It's what like is doing there is it's revealing a little bit about your emotional state. It's revealing how you felt about the situation that was happening. So in the example of the boss saying you have to work all weekend and you telling whoever, I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. One can, I think, correctly surmise that you are not thrilled with this development and that you're going to do it anyway, probably because you would like to maintain your job, one assumes, but you're not thrilled about it. And if you had felt bold enough to say what you said to the person while you're telling the story, I don't think you would have it. I mean, who knows? I don't know your fictional life like that. But yeah, what like does in the quotative is it makes telling stories a little more interesting. It makes telling stories a little more fun. And it also, I think the most important thing is that it does reveal, it sort of lifts the curtain a little bit on your inner turmoil, your emotional state, and however you feel about a thing at that time without having to say directly, this thing made me feel good, bad, this, that, or the other. Because that is just no one, I mean, sometimes that is applicable, but like not all the time.
The word like, as we've been discussing it, is associated with women's speech. It's not exclusive to women. There's a word that is associated with men's speech, dude, and
Mhm.
it does some of the same things. What sort of role can dude play
Well,
in language?
the thing about dude is that it can be an interjection, it can lead a sentence, it can also be the only word in a conversation based on like how you're saying it. There is that SNL skit in which that does indeed happen. Um, And so dude, what dude is doing for men, I think, is that it's establishing a rapport. It's establishing sort of like, we are men. We are on the same page. We are manly men. We're hanging out. There is no hint of sexual anything between us. This is just men being men, doing man things. And that, like, okay, guys, cool, great. I'm glad you have a word that helps you figure that out now. But also the difference with dude is that, like I said, there's like a cool attached to it. There's sort of like, there's a lifestyle sort of thing. I mean, the dude from the Big Lebowski, aspirational to some, many actually, probably, which is fine. But yeah, it's like is not, we have not yet gotten to the point where I think like could become like like an effective lifestyle brand. Whereas I do think that dude very much could be, if not already is, in sort of a larger, like holistic sense. But yeah, it doesn't get the same, you don't get the same flack for it because it's kind of like, not necessarily boys will be boys, but it's like, all right, like, don't call me dude, son or whatever. Like, I'm not a dude. I'm your mom or whatever. But also it's not nearly as, I think it's kind of like, oh, boys, like, you're going to say stuff. It's fine. Whereas, a girl says, I was like, I hate this thing. And that's cause for a huge uproar. And it's like, why? This is unequal. This doesn't make any sense.
How do AI chatbots do with the use of the word like as we've been discussing it?
So, oh God, I mean, the chatbots are really evolving truly faster than I would like to think about. I think the thing with AI is that I say this and I'm like, I'm speaking this to existence, but I would like to hope that it will never actually in my lifetime be able to really accurately replicate a human speech, because the use of filler words in the places that feel appropriate and correct and not weird is dependent upon being able to like read another person's emotions, to read a room, to figure out a situation. And you can sort of like, I mean, I'd like tricked AI into sort of using like in a way that didn't seem insane. And that was by telling it, I believe, to write, what is it? I think it was like to write a breakup letter in the voice of like a valley girl. And that is when it did spit out something that was like crazy, but also did have like where it needed to go. But it did seem forced. It seemed like it was sort of acting in a way that, I don't want to think about a chatbot like making a conscious decision to act. So that's that's terrifying. But I think I would like to think that it will be, we're a ways out from that ever happening, if it ever happens at all. This is my hope.
Is there reason to believe the use of the word like will cause us to come across as less authoritative?
I think only sometimes. And I think very specific situations. And one of those situations, I talked to a woman named Samara Bay, who is like a speech dialect coach, and among other things. And I talked to her about professionalism, which is something that has come up a lot of times when I speak about this word. And her point was that, in like a work environment, you sort of, again, like in any other place, you modulate, you see who you're talking to and what you're talking about, and you adjust what you're going to say based on that. And so if you're giving a presentation to a bunch of very important people at work and you are you're confident, or at least probably nervous, both, hopefully, I think your speech is clearer, probably because you're trying to get through it, just get through this presentation and have it be done, but also because you have some sort of confidence in what you're saying. And so, a lot of the criticism is that like makes you sound unsure, and it makes you sound that like it indicates a lack of confidence. And my general retort to that is like, that's generally okay. Like we can give ourselves a minute to figure out what we're going to say, or think about however what it is, like how this thought connects to the next, like that's fine. I suppose in some professional situations, maybe you want to you want to maybe just not say it as much, but I think it comes naturally with confidence with if you feel good about what you're saying and feel like you know what you're talking about, then you will probably just say it in the way that is the most direct to get your point across.
The book made me think about the fact that occasionally I will, on this show, begin a question with the word so, even
Hmm.
though it doesn't necessarily connect with precisely what we were just speaking about. It doesn't
Right.
mean therefore.
Right.
And there may have been some emails complaining about this, and I understand people's irritation. But it occurs to me that if I said well at the start of the same sentence, just to give myself a moment,
Mm,
I don't think I've ever received a complaint about that.
about well.
About well. If I
Yeah.
said, "Well, this is a problem," as opposed to, "So, this is a problem."
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I have heard that people are so starting a sentence with so is something that people don't like. I don't, I've never thought about it in a way that is negative. It just seems like, I feel like it's similar to saying right as you're speaking in the middle of a sentence as you're linking one sentence to the other. I think it's a similar kind of thing. And what I think it's doing there is kind of saying like, are you are you with me? Are we like I'm are you following along? And not in a mean way or anything. Literally just in a giving I'm giving both of us a break to sort of absorb what was said before, but I'm also maybe changing topics in a way that is like abrupt. So maybe we need something in between to sort of indicate that there's going to be a direction change. Um, I understand that starting a sentence with so is grammatically incorrect. I assume that's why people are upset about it. I doesn't matter to me.
Were you always this sort of person, or did you have to come around to the idea that natural speech is natural speech and we each have our own brand of it?
No, I've always been this way. I've always been this way. I was raised primarily by my father, who is a lovely man and who did very little policing of anything. I mean, aside from like if I did obviously bad stuff, then yes, but I didn't do much of that either. He let me read whatever I wanted. He didn't really have an issue with how we spoke. He never said to me or my sister, you guys have to act or speak or do a certain way in order to be successful. And my sister and I both turned out pretty okay, I think. So yeah, no, this has always been what you're getting now is what you're getting same version if we're not recording, if we're somewhere else. Like I've never really had a I mean, I have like a customer voice, I have like a professional moment if I need to, but generally speaking, no, I've always found it more important to me to be sort of more authentic, like actually authentic, as opposed to like a fake authenticity. I've always found that that has served me well enough. I'm waiting for it to stop serving me. I'm sure it will at some point, but I don't know when that is.
We should talk about Terry Gross on her
Yes.
show Fresh Air. You note she uses like in a lot of these allegedly non-standard ways, but with very deliberate intentions.
Yes. And that I think is very smart and good because Terry Gross is good at her job. And so she knows that the one way to make someone else who is probably intimidated by the fact that they're sitting down and talking to Terry Gross, how you make that situation comfortable is you sort of read the vibe. You is really just a gentle vibe check, a quiet one, a silent one. But, if you want to make someone feel more comfortable, you're probably going to talk to them in a way that is more casual. And so, but if you know that you're speaking to someone who is definitely not like that and who is a little more buttoned up and who would rather just, who would probably be someone who would write into NPR and say, you're saying like too much. If you're talking to that person, you're probably you're going to button up a little bit more. And I think that, I'm sure people have noticed her use, but that, I'm sure she's gotten some letters about that, but it's strategic in that sense. And I think that's obviously, that's fine. That's just being smart. It's just being good at your job, because you're not going to, why would you alienate a guest who's very clearly maybe sort of nervous or whatever else? Why would you alienate them by giving them, straight Mrs. NPR, Terry Gross talking to a head of state vibes, when that is simply not the dress code for the event. Why are you in a cocktail dress when everyone else is in cutoffs? Like, what happened there? What was the miscommunication?
So it might be that people who do this more often or in certain situations are just better at, as you say, reading the vibe of the person they're talking with.
Yeah, if your job is to speak to other people professionally and have the general public hear it, then I assume that you've learned over the course of time sort of how to speak to somebody, sort of how, yeah, what the vibe is, how to assess it, how to pick it up pretty quickly, and then how to adjust what you're doing when you start, but also as you're doing it. And that came up in the podcasters that I spoke to for the book, Bobby Finger and Lindsay Weber, who do Who Weekly, which is one of my favorite podcasts. I spoke to both of them about editing, how they edit their podcasts. And both of them said they generally keep in the likes unless it is like extremely invasive, I guess, or if it sort of breaks up, I'm doing it now. If it doesn't function to sort of make the sentence or the speech keep going, if it is sort of like a really hard break or they're stuttering or whatever else, then they'll take it out. But generally speaking, most people I talk to who do this for a profession leave it in because it keeps like a shred of like humanity.
Leave it in where they might take out uhs and ums.
Yes, like an and Lindsay and Bobby were both very sort of adamant that an and an is kind of worse than a like, because an and an I think it's a different sound, and it's a sound that is probably more akin to dead air, and no one wants dead air. Like, that's, to me, seems bad, because if that ever happens to me on a podcast I'm listening to, I'm wondering, like, did my phone, like, what has happened to my telephone?
Right.
Like, is someone calling me? What's going on? Usually it's because someone has just paused. But yeah, I think an or an I do think probably makes you sound a little bit like you actually don't know what you're talking about. Whereas a like is just, you're just talking because you're talking. You're saying stuff and you've got a lot to say and you need to string it all together, and that's how you're doing it. So yeah, there I go. But I have noticed that I do say a lot when I'm doing stuff like this, and I cared about it for about 5 minutes and said, it doesn't matter.
Megan, thanks so much for this conversation.
Thank you. This has been really fun.
Think is distributed by PRX, the Public Radio Exchange. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you get podcasts, and at our website, think.kera.org. Again, I'm Krys Boyd. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.